All right, man, peace. So most of you brothers know by now that I've spent a lot of time detailing what, in my view, is the overall mentality and the psychological profile of the average liberal so-called black male. I've always stated that they lead with victimization, particularly self-victimization. They have to first cast themselves in the victim role so that when they go on their tangents and their rambling diatribes, they can try to guilt shame the target of their diatribe and their rant into agreeing with them, even if their ramblings have no substance and no validity. That's how they cast themselves, and that's how they've been trained by their overlords, the liberal Caucasian male and female, as well as the overlords of the overlords, the liberal Caucasian so-called Jew, male and female. That's how they've been trained, and it's a trickle-down effect. You can always tell an asset of the super liberal faction because they utilize the same tactics over and over again, generation upon generation. It's just they do a little tinkering here and there, depending on the time in history and what's acceptable. In the same way that certain super liberal factions utilize Jackie Robinson so that they could engineer society, they're doing the same thing today through LeBron James, basically trying to puff them up with the promise that they're always going to be remembered in history as the person who was responsible for, quote unquote, bringing together opposites, because that's a major component of their hermetic and alchemical belief system. And you brothers know by now, I've stated that in my view, LeBron James is a monarch athlete, an asset of the powers that be, as well as a Luciferian. I'm also on record as stating that in my view, Draymond Green is also a monarch programmed athlete. I've stated that in my view, the number 23, particularly on basketball athletes or super athletes or athletes of prominence who've been written into the overall narrative of the NBA, means that they have been manipulated genetically, from Michael Jordan to LeBron James to Draymond Green, and depending on their level of success in the sport, that's how they're cast. Now, Draymond Green, of course, is not a super athlete or is not considered to be a super athlete, but he has been interwoven into the overall NBA script as a frontline character or player or what have you. He's in the background of Stephen Curry, but he's been a more notable figure than many of the other better players on the team, like a Klay Thompson. Why is that? Because they want him to be cast as a pivotal figure and a societal influencer. His mother is his handler, just my view of it. And that's the reason why slowly but surely the script has had Draymond Green grow closer to LeBron James. He's now under the LeBron James Rich Paul umbrella of Clutch Sports, and basically he acts as an ambassador and an emissary for LeBron James, oftentimes speaking up for him even more than many of LeBron James' teammates do. Why is that? Because LeBron James once again has been cast as a very pivotal figure from the sporting perspective, involved in changing the world, quote unquote. He's a world changer. He is an illuminator. So now Draymond Green once again is going to utilize the self-victimization tactic. He's going to claim that LeBron James is the most afflicted and oppressed athlete of all time. This is what Draymond Green basically is going to allege. Now, Rick Bucher, aka Slick Rick, as Marcellus Wiley and Emmanuel Acho call him, is going to speak the unabashed and unadulterated truth. And it's going to be very difficult for the LeBron James fanboy, Emmanuel Acho, to accept. Let's pay very close attention to how this conversation transpires. Let's listen to many of the things that Rick Bucher states and why he states it, and how it has not only the kernel of truth, but the entire popcorn is the truth. There's no doubt about it. And the truth is always very difficult for a fanboy to accept because fans lead with their emotions. They're emotionally unstable and psychologically unstable. So anyway, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
You're watching Speak for Yourself. Marcellus Wiley up here, homeboy. Emmanuel Acho over there. My dog. My dog. Let's get to the NBA. LeBron James could be out for up to a month. But that does not mean we can't talk about his resume. The King is a 4-time champ on 3 different teams and is in the GOAT conversation. But despite all that, LeBron still faces a lot of criticism. His rival, Draymond Green, had a lot to say about that. Take a listen.
If I think who is...
Which you very rarely ever do. You very rarely ever think. But go ahead.
The most beat down athlete of our generation. And
the most beat down athlete of this current generation is without a doubt Floyd Mayweather. And it's not even a close second. The most beat down athlete of this generation, meaning of the past 25 years, is Floyd Joy Mayweather Jr. No doubt about it. And there's not a close second. Anyone else claiming to be beat down such as a LeBron James or Serena Williams, is only quote-unquote capping, as a lot of the young brothers say. That's all they're doing. They're looking for attention. And it is not the case, because those two athletes in particular, LeBron James and Serena Williams, have been feted more than any other mainstream athlete in American sports.
Probably of all time, the athlete that has taken the most criticism is LeBron James.
This cat looks like he's under mind control as he's speaking. Look at how he's looking up at the sky or at the ceiling or whatever the hell he's looking up at, as if he's almost reading from a script. LeBron James is the most oppressed and afflicted athlete not only of this generation but of all time. This is why you're not supposed to take what athletes say seriously, because they're not historians. This cat does not know anything about Muhammad Ali, much less Jack Johnson. Now, if you want to speak about someone who was truly afflicted, read about Jack Johnson.
Got to bring in Fox NBA analyst Slick Rick the Bucher, but Acho, has LeBron taken too much heat in his career?
Absolutely not. Not only has LeBron James not taken too much heat, he has not taken enough. For him to inject himself into the so-called quote-unquote GOAT conversation when he has not earned it. And even if he were to get to 6 championships, it's going to take him at least 20 years, something that it took Michael Jordan 13 years to get to that accolade or to that accomplishment. He still would have to be graded appropriately. If it takes you a longer time to do the same thing, how could you be on that person's level? But just getting back to the point, the media has carefully crafted LeBron James's mythos and his narrative, especially the modern day super liberal sports media, to try to omit a lot of the more unsavory aspects of his life story. There are a lot of tidbits about LeBron James that I'm sure Rick Bucher knows, but he's not at full liberty to detail. He knows about the side chicks and the side babies. He knows about the payoffs so that certain people don't speak about the real LeBron James. I'm sure that he knows about the quote-unquote PEDs, allegedly. But these are things that he's not at liberty to speak about because it would assail the overall aura around LeBron, and it's not good business to do that. You don't try to cook the golden goose. It makes no sense.
LeBron might be the most underappreciated athlete of all time, but...
By who? All we hear about every day is LeBron James and what he does for society. The schools that he builds, the foundations that he runs, the money that he allegedly gives away, the businesses that he opens, how much he's an advocate for social change, how he champions the LGBTQ and so-called black people. Over and over again, we're constantly inundated with this propaganda about this man. So how could he possibly be unappreciated? It makes no sense.
LeBron James's criticism is just a microcosm of a macro issue in society. We take things for granted.
I would agree with that, but I don't believe that we take LeBron James for granted. I think that people take the moments that they have to live life for granted. They spend more time worrying about others and other people's business than they do trying to improve themselves. They spend more time worshiping professional athletes than they do honoring their parents. That's what we take for granted.
Heater for granted before it gets cold. We take having no traffic for granted when there's too much traffic on the 405. We take things in our life for granted, and LeBron James is no exception of that. Been in the league for 18 years, has been to 9 out of the last 10 finals. The only time LeBron James wasn't in the finals in the last decade was when he was injured.
Let me say this very quickly. LeBron James is the first athlete that I've seen where the media has made so much of a show pertaining to how much he has participated in the finals as opposed to how many finals he's won. I've never seen this done or heard this done for any other athlete on the level that they've done it for LeBron James. It's the equivalent of claiming that Jim Kelly should be considered the greatest quarterback of all time because he went to 4 straight Super Bowls, something that no other quarterback has ever done. No quarterback has gone to 4 straight Super Bowls. You've had some who have won back-to-back, like Tom Brady did, or Joe Montana did, or Troy Aikman did. But we never hear about what Jim Kelly did, which is go to 4 straight. And let the record show that today's modern-day super liberal media holds participation in almost the same light as they do victory. So if that's the case, how come we don't talk more about Jim Kelly? How come we don't speak more about Jerry West, who's 1-8 in the finals? I mean, if participation is that important, let's speak more about Mr. Clutch, right?
Mind you all, it is hard to get a 90 on a test. And LeBron James is getting a 90 of going to the NBA Finals in the last decade. Now, to talk...
No, sir. You can't get a 90 for going to the NBA Finals. I understand what you're trying to say, going 9 out of 10 years, but that's not quite how we quantify greatness. We quantify greatness through victory, not through participation.
LeBron James, we could look at him in isolation, right? I really only see one criticism of LeBron James. He doesn't have...
Really? Then you probably need LASIK surgery if you only see one criticism, because I can see quite a few.
Killer instinct, because...
No, not just lacking killer instinct, he's also a pathological liar. Let's start there. He's a massive narcissist, a toxically massive narcissist, an almost borderline fatally massive narcissist, a sadist almost when it comes to narcissism. No doubt about it. Like, he has some massive personality flaws.
Than that, he is the best player to have ever touched a basketball. I mean, he's a better passer than Michael Jordan.
That's about it. That's about the only thing that I will state. In my view, LeBron James does better than Michael Jordan is pass the basketball. There's nothing else that he does better. He's not a better defender. He's not a better scorer. He's not a better free throw shooter. Some might say, well, he has a higher shooting percentage from behind the three-point arc, but this is a three-point shooting era. So, I mean, if we were to alter the stats or grade them on a curve based on era, for LeBron James to only be a percentage point above Michael Jordan when it comes to three-point shooting, or a couple of percentage points, that to me would indicate that were Michael Jordan to be playing today and the three-point shot be overly accentuated as a part of his offensive package or offensive repertoire, he'd probably be shooting somewhere around 39 to 40% from three. If it was as accentuated today in his game as it is for every other athlete, or if it was accentuated to the degree it is today back during Michael Jordan's time. But almost everything that Michael Jordan does, he does better than LeBron James. He's even a better rebounder than LeBron James. It's just that it's not his job, or it was not his job, to focus on the boards. That team had Dennis Rodman. That team also had Horace Grant and Bill Cartwright. So back then, the style of NBA play was much more positional. The power forward would be offended if the guards tried to get too many of the rebounds, because that's how they got paid. At the end of the season, Horace Grant had to show Bulls management or the Orlando Magic management, I'm getting 10, 11 rebounds per game. If you're a guard out there trying to battle him for rebounds, it's going to be a problem in the locker room. And that's what people don't understand when they try to parse out these stats and figure out who's better based on stats. LeBron James is a stat hog. Everybody knows that.
Rebounder than Michael Jordan. He has more points than Michael Jordan, but he doesn't have the same killer instinct as Michael Jordan. Sal, Slick, Rick, people at home, our biggest criticism of LeBron James is this.
Look at Rick Buger. Rick Buger shaking his head like, silly Negro.
He goes to the finals. That's literally our biggest criticism. What is our biggest knock on LeBron James is that he goes to the finals and loses. So if our big...
No, not quite. Our biggest criticism of LeBron James is that he runs to seek out a super team whenever he can't get the job done on his original team. Once again, to me, the biggest indignity of LeBron James' career is that on a team with Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, J.R. Smith, Tristan Thompson, Emmanuel Shumpert, he was only able to win one game against a Golden State Warriors team that had Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green. Now, some people might say, what are you talking about, bro? The Golden State Warriors, they had 2 MVP-level players. Right, but if you're LeBron James and you're the greatest player ever, I would expect that you would at least win 2 games, if not take it to 7, because you're the best player ever, right? So a matchup between you and KD is supposed to look like the matchup between Jordan and Drexler in 92. That's how that matchup was supposed to look if LeBron James is the guy that these people say he is.
Criticism of an athlete is his appearance in the biggest game of his sport. Then what type of criticism is that? I will end my first lap because I'm coming out. Shots fired. Not with what
you're firing blanks, brother.
James has done for himself, but what has LeBron James done for other people? Because that is truly a mark of a man's greatness, is what they do for other people. LeBron James has turned Erik Spoelstra from a coach who got out of the first round twice to a coach who has won a championship twice. LeBron...
So disgusting. The way that these people talk about some of LeBron James's coaches, you would think that Erik Spoelstra begged to get the Cleveland Cavaliers job so that he can coach over LeBron James. This is the reason why LeBron James has so many haters. LeBron's fans are oblivious to this. They have no idea how toxic their thought processes are and how it results in people searching out a super scrutiny level of meticulousness when they evaluate LeBron James's career. It's all because of, the detachment that LeBron James's fanboys have from reality. They act like LeBron James is God's gift to the planet Earth, not just the NBA, and then you wonder why he's so narcissistic. The fact of the matter is that Eric Spoelstra is a spectacular head coach. Everyone gives Phil Jackson so much credit for being a great head coach, and Michael Jordan has been one of the great helps in that because he's always done the most that he could to let people understand that Phil Jackson was one of the main reasons why they started to win championships. And this was before Phil left the Chicago Bulls to go coach the LA Lakers. LeBron James has never really made a real attempt to talk about how great his coaches were and the difference they made in helping him win championships. And the fact of the matter is that the coach must matter because almost everywhere that he's gone, they've had to switch coaches in order for him to win a championship, other than in Miami, where he tried to have Eric Spoelstra fired, but because Pat Riley was the alpha dog in that doghouse, LeBron James had to stand down, and once again, LeBron had to come there to learn how to win.
He's turned Chris Bosh from a person who never made it out of the first round to a NBA champion twice.
Really, so what did Chris Bosh do for LeBron James? Because LeBron James never won shit until he got with Chris Bosh.
LeBron James turned Kyrie Irving from a person with one playoff series win to one NBA championship.
No, not quite. Kyrie Irving never even made the playoffs until LeBron James got there. And beyond that, Kyrie Irving was a necessary piece for LeBron James to go back to Cleveland in the first place. Kyrie won the All-Star Game MVP in 2014, the year before LeBron James decided to quote-unquote go back home. And Kyrie was upset when he heard that LeBron James was coming back to Cleveland. He was not happy about it.
And Kevin Love from a person with no playoff appearances to a person with 4
Look at Rick Bucher. Rick Bucher's getting so mad.
Championship finals appearances and 1 win. LeBron James turned Frank Vogel from a video coordinator to an
No, sir, not quite. Frank Vogel was not no damn video coordinator. Maybe you're thinking about Eric Spoelstra. Maybe they were both video coordinators before they got head coaching jobs. But put some respect on Frank Vogel's name. Frank Vogel had gone to an Eastern Conference Finals in 2014 to face off against LeBron James in the Heat. And that was well before he became the head coach of the Lakers and presided over LeBron James winning a championship in the NBA's Black Lesbians Matter Bubble Tournament. Look at Rick Bucher's face. He's flabbergasted.
Champion head coach. It's not just what LeBron James has done for himself. What has LeBron James done for other people? While solidifying and cementing his own career, he solidified the careers of others.
There was a lot of smart stuff you said, logical stuff you said at the very beginning. But
I'm not even quite sure about that.
Started on the wrong track. No, he has not received more criticism than he deserves, and that whole soliloquy that you just gave us is exactly the problem. If we take
Thank you, sir.
the critics versus the proponents, the apologists, the sycophants, and you ask me which army is bigger, it's not even close.
Thank you, sir. LeBron James is the most protected mega athlete in the history of modern professional sports, and it's not even close. People who grew up back in the late 80s, early 1990s, remember the scrutiny and the criticism that Michael Jordan was placed under. That yes, he's a great spectacular player, but he's a ball hog, and he doesn't know how to win, and he'll never be Magic Johnson or Larry Bird. That's what was stated about him during that time. And, he just dealt with it and was able to overcome the obstacles. He didn't bitch and complain and claim that, everybody's picking on him and all this other nonsense. He didn't try to up and run to the Celtics or to the Pistons or to the Lakers. He just did what he had to do with his team.
No one has ever, to my knowledge, ever criticized what LeBron James has done. The criticism is what those proponents and apologists and sycophants want us to believe it means. That's where it goes off the rails.
Thank you, sir. In other words, LeBron James's accomplishments get overinflated.
As you just eloquently misspoke and presented all the things that he did for all these other people, and not acknowledging that he didn't know how to win a championship or play in championship form until he went to the Miami Heat.
Thank you, sir. And that's why LeBron James will continue to be the recipient of a massive amount of quote-unquote hate, i.e. truth-telling, until he humbles himself and acknowledges that he needed help along the way. And because he refuses to do that and wants to call himself king, really Molech, that's why he called himself king, because that's an allusion to Molech. As long as he keeps doing that, people are going to continue to hyper-scrutinize him.
And played within that organization and played next to Dwayne Wade. Don't hide from the fact that Dwayne Wade handed him the keys to the car and showed him how things had to ultimately get done.
In more ways than one. It's very apparent to me that Dwayne Wade was the master to LeBron James's apprentice in Luciferianism when LeBron James went down to Miami. Especially in light of many of the esoteric shenanigans that Dwayne has become involved in the aftermath of his basketball career.
Against the Dallas Mavericks.
Fight.
Here's the other part.
It's coming. It's fight time. Ding, 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 ding. This dude's Slick funny. Go ahead, Slick. Go ahead.
Emmanuel Acho is embarrassed. That's why he's laughing like that. He's trying to cover up for his embarrassment.
Go get my belt.
LeBron James fanboys, they hate to be called out for the fanboys that they are. Whether it's Emmanuel Acho or Shannon Sharp, a lot of these guys, they hate to be called what they are, which is nothing but fanboys.
He's not criticized. He's criticized for the words that don't match the actions.
Thank you, sir.
Criticized for hashtagging just a kid from Akron and yet answering his phone, King. Or
wow, check that out. Look at how Marcellus Wiley's face changed, and even Emmanuel Acho's face changed when they got that revelation that that's how LeBron James answers his phone. And once again, what is that an allusion to? Number one is massive narcissism. Number two, his worship of Molech and his belief that basically he's a fleshly vicar of Molech. There's a lot that goes on with these athletes, but I'll be dealing with LeBron James in another video, especially pertaining to his outright quote-unquote veneration and adoration of the ghost of Kobe Bean Bryant and Nipsey Hussle. Let me rewind this back just a little bit.
He's criticized for hashtagging just a kid from Akron and yet answering his phone, King. Or when Daryl Morey tweeted out on China saying that he's misinformed and uneducated, and then making a mess of it, LeBron, with his response on what it actually meant. He does everything to draw attention to himself.
You know when a LeBron James critic is heated, because they'll start talking about China. And let me say this, LeBron James did not really mess up in his China response. He did what he had to do to hold the line for his company. He's a company man. It was his job to protect the interests of Nike Incorporated at all times and at all costs, and that's what he did. Even if it means falling on the sword, that's what he's going to do to protect Nike interests.
In itself is to invite criticism. So this idea that he is criticized more than he deserves, no, he's lauded far more than he's criticized.
Thank you. And he's lauded far more than he deserves. And he goes out there trying to execute stunts and escapades, trying to convince lame brain people that he's something that he's not in order to curry favor like a low-level politician. And it's pathetic, man.
I just can't. Look, we usually have a good time on this show, and I'm usually pretty happy. This makes me angry.
I can see that, because it's very obvious that, when it comes to LeBron James, Rick Bucher can see through the bullshit. And if you want to see two people get really heated, match a truth speaker against a fanboy, and you're going to see, a matchup and an altercation that sometimes can get violent.
The kid who just continually screws up and then goes, I can't believe you guys are mad at me. Why are you mad at me? It just drives me crazy.
Wow. I loved it, first of all.
Tell us how you really feel, Rick Bucher.
Ready to see this fight.
Drives me crazy.
Ding, ding.
Slick, that tape drives me crazy. Slick, don't you dare for 1 second fix your lips to try to...
How he gonna fix lips when he ain't got no damn lips?
that Dwayne Wade was a bigger conduit of success to the Heat championships than LeBron James.
He didn't say that. What he stated was the truth, that being that LeBron James had to go down to Miami to learn how to win from the Miami Heat franchise, and that Dwayne Wade gave LeBron James the keys to the team, which is what happened. These are just facts. Whether anyone wants to admit it or not, LeBron may have been considered the better player, but personality-wise, Dwayne Wade was the alpha.
I remind the NBA excellent Slick Rick himself that the 3 years prior to LeBron James joining the Heat, they didn't go to the playoffs. They lost in the first round. They lost in the first round. LeBron James shows up. They go to the finals. 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 Slick, there is one.
That's very true, but where did LeBron James hide his rings before he went to Miami? Because Dwayne Wade had a finals championship and an MVP award from the finals prior to teaming up with LeBron James.
To that ultimate success that the Heat had, and it was LeBron James. So credit
No,
to
there's
Dwayne
not.
Wade. Credit.
They changed that whole team.
Thank you, sir. And they not only brought in LeBron, they also brought in Chris Bosh, a multiple-time All-Star and a Hall of Famer.
Look, wait. Hey.
Did they have Chris Bosh? Did they have Chris Bosh prior to that?
Ooh, I told you. That's your weakness.
Chris Bosh that
That's your
gave us,
weakness.
Slick, didn't he give us, what, 12, 8, and like 6?
They also brought in a bunch of shooters, and don't try to talk down Chris Bosh. This is something that LeBron James fanboys love to do. They love to talk down the heavy contributors on the LeBron James championship teams because that's how they try to pump up LeBron. They brought in shooters like Mike Miller and Shane Battier, who was also a two-way defensive player. And then the next year, they brought in Ray Allen, who's basically the reason why LeBron James won that second championship.
Oh, you gonna Slick? Don't.
What?
Slick,
Because he
you
like
gotta
revolves
Slick,
himself
you
around
gotta Slick.
LeBron James?
Slick. Eric Spoelstra will likely go into the Hall of Fame.
And deservedly so.
We go into the NBA Hall of Fame exclusively because of LeBron James. Exclusively, a head coach will make it into the Hall of Fame because
Was LeBron on the Heat team that went to the finals last year?
That same Heat team that lost to
Was
LeBron James?
Was he on that Heat team? Was he on that Heat?
That Heat team
The Heat team with the
that Heat
rookies?
team?
Right, but remember that he got there, Emmanuel Acho. According to you, they deserve a lot of credit for getting there. Isn't that what you say about LeBron? That he deserves so much credit for getting there? Now all of a sudden you want to talk about who lost?
He's the team that was like the 4th, 5th seed. Like that. You're talking about that Eric Spoelstra? You're talking about Eric Spoelstra, who's only second to Steve Kerr in total playoff wins currently among coaches. That's the Eric Spoelstra we're talking about?
Eric Spoelstra.
And I gotta go all the way back to when LeBron was with the Miami Heat in order to like say that he was good?
Without LeBron.
People forget that the Miami Heat were a Game 7 victory against the Toronto Raptors away. I'm trying to remember what year it was. I think it was 2015. From facing off against LeBron and the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think it was. But I remember one year the Heat faced Toronto and they lost in 7. And had they won that game, they would have squared off against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And that would have been a hell of a series.
Eric Spoelstra couldn't even sniff. Is that the second round of the... Now, is that the second round?
The Eric Spoelstra that LeBron James wanted to get fired after he first got there, and Pat Riley said, "No, we're not doing that because this dude can run this shit."
LeBron James took Mike Brown to the finals. He took Ty Lue to the finals. He took Frank Vogel to the finals. He could have took you to the finals, me to the finals, Sal to the finals, any of
Right, but if that's the case, why do so many of his coaches get fired? If LeBron James is so great and he's such a help to all these coaches, how come he's had so many coaches? That tells me that he's not a bringer of stability. He's a bringer of chaos.
watching the show to the finals. LeBron James didn't need Eric Spoelstra. Let's not get it twisted, Slick. And that.
So then why do you have to come to Miami in the first place, Acho? How come he couldn't win a championship in Cleveland with Mike Brown?
Problem. This conversation is a problem with the question. There are still doubters of LeBron James's greatness.
The reason why there are still doubters, and they're not really doubters of his greatness, I think that most people recognize him as a great player. The problem that people have is that LeBron James loves to toot his own horn about him being the best player ever. And common consensus normally entails that the people should determine who's the greatest player ever. LeBron has no class. I mean, to make a long story short, he has no class whatsoever.
Rick, you are proving yourself to be one of the doubters. LeBron James has not needed much of anyone besides LeBron James.
Okay. Ding, 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 ding. Let's go to the judges' score. I have to side with you, Slick Rick. You won that one. One, because I've never seen Acho crumble his paper. And
yeah, he's a fanboy. He got upset. So, of course, he started to lose his composure.
Paper neatly in the same take, which means you got them all over the place. Do you want the paper or not, damn it? What the hell was that? Okay, this is what I got to say. I don't even know what mine is going to land, but I'm going to just tell you what I felt when I saw this question. You got them hot over here. Woo, Sunday church. Okay. Draymond brought this on, so we're going to talk about Draymond and LeBron and where this is going to go. I think that LeBron doesn't take too much heat. I'm going to use Acho's words to start off my take. If you want to avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing.
Absolutely. To be special means to open up yourself to criticism, because the average person is going to be envious of you. So at the very least, if you're going to criticize people who have achieved a lot, make sure that your criticisms are credible.
Or, in this situation, LeBron James, be careful. You are everything. So guess what's coming your way? A lot of criticism. But let's not confuse that criticism with hate. Because it's not hate. Because if it was truly hate, it would stop you, LeBron. And it is not stopping you. It's more of dislike. And Slick Rick kind of pointed it out in terms of some of the things he layered. But also, I want to point out that some of these things just lack perspective. Let's start off with why LeBron James gets so much attention, so much criticism.
Because he's an attention seeker and a self-victimizer. So that helps play into the notion that I'm being afflicted, which helps to build his brand. The afflicted one is always the person that people focus on, because they want to see if he's able to transcend the so-called affliction or oppression. So it's a major part of brand building. They try to utilize the same paradigm with Kaepernick.
It's dislike. It's because he's the first superstar of the social media era. Let's just be factual about this. And what comes from that is, one, you're going to get all this attention because we didn't know what Jordan was doing exclusively between games. We didn't see.
Well, shit, I could tell you. Drinking, gambling, and fucking random broads.
Kitchen, hanging out. And
allegedly.
His entire family like we do with LeBron James. But also, at the same time that social media took off, when LeBron James is the man, was a disruption of traditional media. And I saw this at first. The reporters were fighting for relevance. All the reporters are sitting.
They still are to this day. That social media thing has really fucked up the so-called, I believe that they're known as the fourth estate, the media. They no longer have anywhere near the power that they once had. So now they have to utilize propaganda and, stick according to the company line. That's how they maintain their power of persuasion. And that's why they're so threatened by social media, because we're in the age of information now. So now a lot of their propaganda can be subverted.
Oh my God, what do we do? So you know what they end up doing? They started to say, you know what? Let's be first instead of necessarily right in these situations. What started to happen with these reporters is they started to go, let's be about sizzle instead of about substance.
Thank you, sir. And that's what I try to explain to many people who, like my material. Sometimes it takes a moment to make because I prefer to be correct rather than to be first. And I think that many people appreciate that, because even when I was on YouTube, I used to get a lot of views for topics that were, 2 months previous to when I released a video on it, like Nipsey Hussle or Jussie Smollett, because it takes a long period of time to make sure that you can properly align all the components of a storyline to provide the whys, not just the what happened, but also the how and the why, which is the most important aspect of the scrutiny and the analysis of any narrative, is understanding the why.
And LeBron James has benefited tremendously from all of this dislike.
Sure has.
About it factually. Forbes top celebrity 100 list of 2020. You know LeBron James is higher than Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Another asset in the industry. The Rock, once again, is an allusion to the concept of the quote-unquote sin-bearing stone, or the divine son, who's here to take away the quote-unquote sins of the world. That's what his wrestling name or his entertainment name is meant to be an allusion to, along the same lines of the character of Rocky in the Sylvester Stallone films. But I'll be touching on that in other series.
Yes, I said it. LeBron James. So none of this is stopping LeBron James from any of his success on the court, which you guys debated, but off the court as well. I got item after item that points out what LeBron James is doing. LeBron James was able to catch or close the gap between him and Michael Jordan faster than anybody could in.
Really? Circa 2011, when the Lakers were heading for their second three-peat, I remember very vividly people saying Kobe Bryant is right there nipping at Michael Jordan's heels, and at that time he had 5 championships, not 4. And he had them in fewer seasons than LeBron James. So, you take it for what it's worth. Now, of course, I'm on record as stating that Kobe Bryant was not the best player on his 5 championship teams. In my view, Shaquille O'Neal was the best player on the first 3 teams. But at the end of the day, if we're just going to do a flight evaluation, Kobe did have more championships in a briefer span of time than LeBron James has. So in my view, I remember once again the media trying to pump up the Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant comparison or quote-unquote rivalry, and stating that if Kobe was able to win a championship in 2011, that he was going to be right there with Jordan. That was the media narrative at the time.
Because he used all of this conversation about him as a jetpack and fuel to be who LeBron James is. So, in short, guys, I'm sorry I couldn't jump into that fight. I just don't like when people lose perspective. And to Slick's point, I also don't like when LeBron James comes out and says, I'm scared to leave my house. And
thank you, sir, but once again, that's a part of his victim mongering. He's a self-victimizer, being a so-called liberal Negro. He has to embrace self-victimization so that he can guilt shame the conservative Caucasian. They have to be either guilt shamed or eliminated in these last days. Those are the orders that the liberal black has been given from the liberal Caucasian. Guilt shame the so-called conservative Caucasian and those of your people who are not willing to jump on the liberal bandwagon, or we're just going to have to eliminate them.
like, yeah, but you also leave your house with a security detail and you can't get 20 feet close to you unless you want them to. So
thank you, sir. That's why it's so difficult for me to understand how someone got close enough to LeBron James's house to spray paint the word nigger on the front gate, and still to this day, almost 4 years later, we have yet to see any footage of the assailant. The perpetrator has not been caught. There's been no follow-up to the case, nothing like that, strangely enough.
that's where people are like, LeBron, the kid from Akron, is also like the 5th highest paid athlete in the world and already on $1 billion deal.
Please keep in mind that the area code for Akron, Ohio, or one of the phone area codes for Akron, Ohio, is 330. So, of course, that's meant to be an allusion to LeBron James as the great enlightener or the great illuminator, as well as Steph Curry. That's why strategically they were born there.
When we try to reconcile LeBron James because of the times he talks about himself, sometimes it doesn't add up. But LeBron has to understand this. What is criticism? The cost of praise is just that simple. Anybody else? No?
And you make a good point, Marcellus, that he is the first in the social media age, the first superstar in the social media age. But he's utilized social media more than maybe any superstar. So when you're going to put yourself out there, you are going to invite that criticism. Now, the biggest issue I have with Draymond's statement is, first of all, he was introduced as a rival. He's not a rival.
Thank you. At this time, Draymond Green is clearly a flunky for LeBron James. I mean, I don't even understand. If you're Stephen Curry, how can we go to war against this guy, LeBron James, and you're such a big fanboy of his now? That's what I'm asking Draymond if I'm Stephen Curry. It's like, bro, are you ready to compete against this guy, or you busy trying to slob his knob? Like, what's going on, man?
Maybe once upon a time he was a rival. Now they have the same agent. They're business partners. They're boys. This
Ding.
coming from somebody who sees LeBron at this stage as a rival or a competitor. The other part I have with it is just the lack of perspective.
Yes.
And this is the biggest problem. He is the most beat down athlete of our generation and maybe all time. Colin Kaepernick? Hello? Muhammad Ali? Hello?
Thank you, sir. And they pale in comparison to Jack Johnson. But that's just Draymond Green. Draymond don't know any real history.
Jackie Robinson? I could go to Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf if I wanted to, but
That's a pretty good one.
the reality is this is part of the problem. This is the heart of my issue, is that there's this reach to make LeBron something bigger than he is.
Thank you, sir. That's what I've been talking about on these various platforms for the last 4 years. It's called marketing. Nike's behind all of this bullshit with LeBron James. This guy never spoke about anything involving the so-called black community until 2012 when he copied Dwayne Wade and put on the hoodie. That's why, once again, that's how you know that Dwayne Wade was the master to LeBron's apprentice. All LeBron has ever done is copy other people. He went and copied Derrick Rose with the I Can't Breathe t-shirts. I mean, everything is a big copy. He copied John Wall, and I think the company associated with John Wall with the More Than an Athlete slogan. Everything with him is phony and fallacious.
Already big, and I appreciate that. But the second you try to inflate that, I gotta go, hold on a second. I've seen this. I've read about this. I've watched this. You can't sell me on that because I've seen the difference and I know the difference.
Man, all right, you know me, man. I call it victim mentality, even if you don't think you...
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Acho, pick your head up. It's victim mentality because they love...
Acho is what I call a moderate liberal. But just with that term liberal associated with you, that means that, you know, a lot of times you play into these societal narratives that can cast you in a certain way to try to make people feel sorry for you. The difference with Acho is that many times you can speak enough facts to him and he'll be receptive to them. A toxic liberal or super liberal, they don't want to hear anything based in fact. Everything has to be based in narrative and sentiment. So, I mean, I'll give Acho that much credit, but he still leans to the left.
Focus on the pain, but not the game. So LeBron wants to tell us all the ills, or in this case, Draymond wants to tell us all the ills that come from being LeBron and he's always getting beat up on and all that. And then I'm like, okay, that's fine. Just balance that out. Let's talk about the conversation. I've seen LeBron out. I've talked to LeBron before. Woo. It is not a shared experience. Let's just say that. His man is living high on the hog.
In other words, when he saw LeBron, he was surrounded by big booty bitches, most likely filled with silicone and blonde hair.
Want to hear is the balance, as Slick pointed out, the perspective in this situation. So the benefits of this so-called hate is really thinly veiled love. Everybody loves LeBron.
Well, that's what envy really is, and that's what a hater really is. You know, it's just a fan turned inside out. That's why I always tell you, brothers, don't be a fan, please, and definitely don't come onto my platform with that fan shit, because I already know what you're going to try to pull once your bullshit gets rejected, or the delusion in your mind of what my channel represents does not fulfill your expectations. You're going to try to become a big hater. And I just don't have the patience or the tolerance for it.
Ain't so much that he becomes the point of conversation like he does so often on this show. Acho, I'm going to remix what you said earlier. No haters, no hype. Okay. It beats the alternative, right? No hype, no haters. So LeBron.
Absolutely. Once you get to the top of the mountain, you are going to have haters. As you're climbing to the top of the mountain, or if you just have a ruling class mentality and you show that you're willing to do what you know is best for you, you're going to have people who get very upset, especially black Marxists. Black Marxists, their job basically is to try to convince you that you should not be searching for success. You should be willing and ready to suffer just like they are. They're upset that they have no ideas and no imagination, and they don't want you to take advantage of the ideas that you have, what's known as capitalism. The reason why low-level black Marxists who have that welfare mentality, the reason why they're always trying to assail capitalism is because they have no ideas. They don't know how to start a business. They will not know where to start because they don't understand what their gifts are. They don't know what their marketable skills are. So their thing is, hey, let's just be Marxists. Everything should be free and accessible to all. And somehow in their minds, that's a viable modality for an economy. And that's never going to work. In all Marxist regimes, there are always people who preach Marxism for everybody else, but for themselves, they're capitalists.
You're winning too much, man, to be out here always saying all that, or somebody else is saying it for you in this situation, because to me, it doesn't add up.
What it sounds like is this, and I heard this once before, but it's never rang more true than now. LeBron James doesn't have haters. He only has fans in denial. Slick Rick is a fan in denial currently over the last 15 minutes. Marcellus Wiley, a fan only in denial these last 15 minutes. It's so interesting, though, that LeBron James, him and Draymond, they go from rivals to boys, and over the course of this conversation, Slick Rick and I have gone from boys to rivals. Well, I guess...
This dude is so stupid.
Always another day, another conversation.
But anyway, that's basically it on that, brothers. We'll see We'll see what Draymond Green has to say next. What nonsense comes out of his mouth next. So peace.